To be back at the Port of San Francisco. It's been kind of a while, so it's nice to see all of you and nice to be here. Welcome to WETA's monthly Board of Directors meeting. It's being conducted in person and by video conference, and it's being recorded. To reduce background noise, all video conference participants will be joining this meeting in listen-only mode and muted during the discussion. WETA welcomes comments from the public. A public comment period will be set aside after each discussion period and will be accepted in person and by video conference. Video conference participants wishing to speak are requested to email your name and the item number you'd like to comment on to boardofdirectors@watertransit.org. If you are unable to send an email, you will still be given an opportunity to speak on the item after those who have signed up. So thanks everybody for coming. It's a beautiful day here in San Francisco, moving into a major heat wave. I wonder how many additional ferry riders that will draw, but I think probably quite a lot. So I hopefully look forward to, on the good side, a busy weekend, maybe people trying to get out of the East Bay to a little cooler circumstances here in San Francisco and in the West Bay. Just an update from the Bay Area Council. Some of you may know we were planning to board our new home, the Klamath, down a few piers and the adjoining home of WETA at Pier 9, but that was delayed by a couple of weeks. So we'll be putting out notifications for when the new date will be, but I think it's the week of the 20th, 21st, and 22nd. So she's beautiful. It's really amazing that we've been able to refurbish this 100-year-old ferry and bring her back to San Francisco, where she was birthed at Pier 5 for so many years as the home of Landor Associates. We've put a lot of money and time and effort and gruel into this project, and it'll be nice to get going on this. And I hope we'll all have this great meeting facilities, and I'm hopeful that in the future, we'll not be able to hold meetings of WETA aboard the Klamath. There's a nice conference center to meet there, and it would save you having to walk all these piers down, and it's a little healthier for the staff not to have to do that much exercise. So that's I think much of what I had to say. We received a sad note yesterday from Therese McMillan, who is of course the executive director of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, announcing her retirement in a few months from that post, and announcing that she has a progressive lung illness, which due to the fact that we've been virtual all these months, she's been able to stay on the job, but she'll be leaving that job in a few months. And for any of you who knows Therese, and I've known her for many, many years, and she's a tremendous leader and professional in the transportation field. And really sad that she wasn't able to do the job longer than a few years, because I thought she was MTC's on to a number of good initiatives that are important, and her experience and frame of reference, I think, were really almost unequal. So it's very sad news to hear about a friend. So we'll take care of your health. I think that's probably it for my report. I'm interested to hear how things are going from the team and from my fellow directors. So I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Moyer.
Great, thank you. Good to see everyone. Great to be back in the Port of San Francisco's offices, and that's all I have. So,
you do know the place, right?
I do know the place a little bit.
No trouble finding it. Director in Tinsley.
Yeah, I wanted to take this chance to recognize somebody that I've been watching on the boats for years. He's a deckhand. And today I sat near where he was selling tickets on board. And once again, I couldn't believe the amount of patience he had with working with people having difficulty with the apps and so forth. His name is William Bartz. That's Bart with a Z. And he is exceptional and has been doing it for years. And we're only as good as the people that we have working with the public. So I wanted to say that.
Thank you very much. I took my wife on a trip to San Francisco a week ago Friday, and Oakland. Everybody was really nice and professional, including the gentleman doing that job on that vessel, which was the Dorado. So anyway, very nice. People could be better. So thanks to them and Blue and Gold, working people of WETA, none better. Director Alvin?
Yes, it's great to be here in person and in this space. I am celebrating that it's Transit Month across the nation and here in the Bay Area, and look forward to many of the events that are on the agenda. Among them, a San Francisco Bay Ferry event that I will be on, I hope, later this month. And that's it.
We're going to get a visit from Transportation Secretary Buttigieg next week in San Francisco. Trying to steer him toward a ferry boat, but I don't think we'll have the opportunity, it seems like, to make that happen. But he'll be spending some time with Speaker Pelosi, focused on California. I think he's going to be in Los Angeles first and then here. So if there's anything we can do to stretch out his time, it would have been nice to get him on a ferry, and we tried, I guess, right, James, but not quite enough time in the schedule for that. But it's good to have a visit from him to focus on transportation in the Bay Area. Somebody who is so critical. Let me turn it over to Director Murphy and his team for your report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wonderman. Thanks for your comments. We did offer to be the link between SFO and wherever the secretary might be going in San Francisco. Hope to have him on the Dorado, but we'll wait until next time to figure that out. As long as he keeps being as receptive as they have been to our grant applications, I think we'll take that as a consolation prize. Transit Month is coming up. Tom, a little bit later, is going to give us a summary of the events associated with that. The congratulations on the Klamath making its way to the port. It looks like it's just supposed to be there. It really has fit in as a great part of the landscape. Looking forward to being able to visit that when it's open. And thanks for your comments about Therese. She did get the general managers of all our major systems together on a call to let us know about her retirement. Sad news, of course, and we at WETA, like other agencies, owe her a great deal of thanks. She shepherded us through, maybe the hardest times that transit has ever gone through over the last several years. And she's only been at MTC a short time, of course, in this recent stint, but hard to think of a more impactful time for her. And so we are definitely thankful that she was able to do all of that for us and our riders, our workers, et cetera. Wanted to give you an update on the Sea Change project, the Sea Change vessel that you approved, are operating as part of the demonstration project. We have been working on that. We hope to have it in place already and be operating over the summer months. The last phase of construction in a shipyard is to finish payment to the shipyard and get it transitioned down to the Bay Area. The owner of the Sea Change vessel has had to do a little bit more work with their investors to come up with the remainder of what's needed in addition to the cost of transporting that vessel here. So that's what we're waiting for to happen. We have successfully secured a good amount of funding from sponsors throughout the Bay Area, and I'll hold off on announcing who they are because we want to make a big splash when this vessel is here and when we initiate this demonstration project. But we'll get there eventually, but wanted to make sure that you guys are in the loop and understand the reasons for the delay and that we are still going to move forward with this demonstration project when the time is right. That I'll turn it over to Tom Hall to give us an update on the Transit Month activities that we have planned.
So there's a wide variety of Transit Month activities. I think it's got to be the biggest year ever for Bay Area wide events. In the past, it was very San Francisco centric, but San Francisco Transit Union partnered with East Bay Transit Union in this Bay Area to make it a regional. So part of that is, of course, ferries. So on September 16th, Seamus will be taking part in Transit GM ride along and summer social. I think it was called the happy hour. It's not called that anymore. Thanks to the input of some of the transit agencies. So that'll be an opportunity for the CEOs and GMs of major transit agencies to get together, ride a couple of different systems, including here in the city, Bart, Muni, and Barry over to Oakland, where they'll all gather for a social event at a transit themed establishment in Jack London Square, very close to there. So likely to be some media coverage of that. To be a great opportunity for folks to ask questions and connect with. The second event is one that we've organized ourselves. We're calling it the Barry Pub Crawl. And essentially it'll be the following week. It'll be Friday, September 23rd. And we're inviting transit fans and advocates and transit agency staffers, many of whom we know through our work working together, to take a ferry over to Oakland, join together at an establishment, do some trivia, have some door prizes, some games, take a short hop ferry over to Alameda, do the same thing again, and then take a ferry back from Alameda Seaplane back to the city. So we think this is a good way to show the breadth of our ferry network and get transit fans on a really. So we're excited for that. We answer any questions, otherwise that's all.
Thank you, Tom. Number of good events planned. You have a number of other reports in this item. I want to call out a couple of them specifically. First, ask Kevin Connolly to introduce the monthly ridership and recovery report.
Thank you, Seamus. Kevin Conley, manager of planning and do my in-camera review here. Manager of planning and development here at WETA. Our monthly ridership and recovery report we provide you every month. This month we decided to do something a little different and show you the span of the entire fiscal year. And Gabe's going to come up in a second and share with you some great charts that show you how we did over the course of the whole year. A couple of themes that will hit. Number one, I think we have a lot to celebrate in terms of when we compare us to our peer agencies. We certainly outpaced them in terms of recovery of ridership. We took a big risk last July in changing our service quite a bit and adding more midday, lessening to some extent our peak service, which had been our bread and butter before. And the rider, it seemed to meet the market need at the time. I think that still stayed the same, although I will share with you over the last 2 months, we have not seen a significant increase in terms of our ridership. Back in June, we were at 70% of our pre-pandemic levels. They were about 50 or 60% now. Back in June, we had big events. We had the Pride Parade, we had Warriors Parade. But we have seen thus far that we're not necessarily keeping pace. Ridership was leveling off or something. Early on in the year, we were doing very healthy work in terms of weekends and off-peak midday ridership. At this point, that's dropped a little bit, and our commute has done a little bit better, but overall, it's about the same in terms of on a daily basis. So we're not seeing the movement that we want to see, particularly recently. And as a result, we are currently exploring some ways that we can potentially adjust the schedule and find some ways to add more, particularly in the middays. Because of our recent survey results, we've seen that riders and prospective riders are looking for more opportunities, more choices. We're interpreting that as greater service throughout the day. Today, we still have gaps in our service. So that's one area that will be a focus of ours, and we'll be coming back to. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Gabe, who's got some charts for the whole year and some good themes. All right, thanks, Kevin. One moment. So I just wanted to kind of walk through a few charts that demonstrate our FY22 ridership. So first, we have
our 10-day weekday average ridership, separated by route. As you can see, Vallejo and Open Island yet the workforces. But especially recently, we've seen kind of a leveling off of ridership, kind of down from those highs. So if we compare FY22 to FY19, separated by the day of the week, you can see that in the past fiscal year, at about 2,000 to 2,500 daily riders for basically all 7 days. That's a little bit different from where we were before the pandemic, where we kind of had a strong peak ridership, especially with then if we take a look just at July 2022 compared to 2019, as we expect, the numbers are a little bit more encouraging, especially towards the tail end of 2022. We started seeing a big uptick in ridership. We've had sort of leveling off. But the pattern of the weekends kind of performing in absolute terms is not the same as the weekdays. So here we have the state average hourly boarding throughout the day. And I think this is kind of illustrative of what we're seeing right now with our peak period not performing where they were before the pandemic. At the midday, it sort of came back to close to 100% where it was. So I think, this kind of illustrates we're seeing these really high vacancy rates of office space in downtown. So our ridership definitely reflects that. Aren't coming back to in-person work. If we look at just the weekday hourly boarding for July 2019 compared to 2022, we're doing a little bit better in July 2022 compared to the whole year of 22, but again, it's still not quite where we were. Still have kind of low peak period ridership with the midday warning on about the same work. And then if we look at the budget projections that we had for 2022, we did outperform our budgeted ridership. It was kind of a zigzag line to get there, but at the end of the year, we did overperform. And I think the pandemic recovery program really kind of set us on that path, adding more service, lowering fares, really enticing riders to kind of come back to the system. And if we compare that to our peer regional transit agencies, we are doing much better. Still not great, but we're outpacing BART and Caltrain ridership recovery almost at a rate of 2 to 1. Especially these last few months, in the summer months, that's kind of when we've seen big uptick. So there might be a seasonal effect here, and we won't really know until we get the data next. Lastly, here's that graph in a chart form. As you can see, we were kind of tracking pretty evenly with BART and Caltrain through the Omicron surge in the winter. Then spring and summertime, that's when we start. So I think moving forward in 2020 months, question mark whether we're going to see ridership have drop back down to where BART and Caltrain is, or we're going to continue kind of going at 60 to 70%. More questions? Question?
I have a couple. So if you go back a slide, I think it's one slide. Maybe it's 2 slides. Maybe it's maybe I don't know how many slides. It seems like when we say we're at 75% pre-pandemic, it looks high compared to this. With some of the other slides, it seems like the red line is like way lower than the blue line, and yet we're 75% pre-pandemic ridership. So how does that get explained?
So this is just weekdays, we're tracking through the time of day. So the peak periods are not performing quite as well, but on the weekends, that's where we're kind of making up that lost ground. But as you saw in the June kind of ordinary ridership numbers, even really big weekends, and what we were doing was mimic that high.
Because, just looking at this slide, we're looking at 2,000, close to 2,000 passengers in the afternoon peak. But we're not coming anywhere, we're at 600, 700, now. So that, that's where we're losing, obviously, no surprise, we're losing the big numbers. And, the sort of crush to get on the ferry is gone. It seems like, it's not, we don't see huge lines, I guess, it's just not in people's minds, I better get to the ferry terminal or I won't get on kind of thing, which we saw before, people were getting left behind in, some cases. And we don't see that anymore, right? I mean, that's not where the head is at, in the mind of the passenger anymore. So there's no urgency in the, in the system. Certainly no different on any other system. In fact, we're ahead of the other ones when it comes to capacity. But just, my ride on the ferry, a week ago, and observing it today, it's just, there's a bunch of people on the boat, but the boat is big, so there's a lot of empty seats on it. It feels empty. One of my former staffers sent me a note. There's a beautiful note. She says, I just took a ride back to Richmond and it was so beautiful. I was the only person on the boat. And I thought, so what was the per capita cost of that trip? So I guess my point of this, this isn't, maybe there's some things we can do as an organization. I think we've done some things. I think we've adjusted schedules. We're trying to watch it really closely. Make it more attractive to as many people as possible. I think that we did that and spread out the service was really a good move. I think the fares that we adjusted downward or, make it more attractive. I think those are still good fares, but they're a lot better, than they were. But I think the real issue here is that the system is designed mostly, in this slide, is showing what San Francisco was like at that time, during this period of time. San Francisco is not like that anymore, as you said. It's not anything like that. It's very quiet. So, I think there needs to be, we need to, the transit world has so much at stake in this. But everybody's got, others have a stake. We need to figure out. I don't know. I know there's no easy answer to this, but we better figure out some way to get back to something that looks more like the demand curve that goes along with this. Because it's not like people aren't riding the ferry because the ferry is not a good alternative. I think we're providing a phenomenal way. We're the only, we're really, as far as I could tell, the only system that people actually could ride. I mean, there were people on the boats I were on just to ride the ferry. People don't typically do that. So we have, we offer something unique, but, we need to reestablish San Francisco as a destination for people to work in, for people to go to, recreate in, attend to, whatever it is. And, that unless we do that, we're looking at a very different model for the future. It's, we can poke around here and poke around there, and, we should try to figure out, but I think it's going to be marginal rather than material kind of growth that we could get out of it. So I wish I think we need a campaign for this city to get people back excited about San Francisco and to incentivize workers to come back to a common place to work. I know it's not easy in this world where we've come to, where people are very comfortable working at home, but just being comfortable in everything. So that's, maybe we should be part of the thinking around that kind of, where we really think about this and not just sort of admire the problem.
Here, wonder, but I think there's a couple of things that that come to mind. One is we should focus on what we can control primarily, and we may be seeing some leveling out that's associated with the new normal. Our weekends are at over 100% of where we were pre-pandemic, and that shows that people are doing what they used to do on the weekends, and the natural trend line of ridership growth that we would have experienced if the pandemic never happened. That's happening on the weekends. That's where we are where we would be. We're just not there during the weekday because of the reasons that we know about. But we also know that the bridge traffic is at 100%. And so even though we're not, and so is there, I don't think we're going to get back to 100% if we just wait for that blue line to look like what it used to look like in San Francisco and for those peak hour commutes to come back. I think we need to do whatever we can do to capture a larger share of the travelers that are making trips today. And that should be our primary focus, not convincing people to get out of their living rooms and back into the office necessarily as WETA, but how to get people who are in their cars and driving to work and traveling anyway to choose our system instead. And we can do that if we make our system more attractive and incentivize people to use it. I think we did that with some of the changes that we made as part of the pandemic recovery program. And it's time for us to think about what's next in our bag of tricks. What else can we do? There are some incremental improvements that Kevin mentioned that we're going to make with the next schedule change, which will happen in October. More frequency, some better coverage, reducing gaps. That will do some amount, but and then the leisure travel and sort of one-time traveler market that seems to be ripe for us right now. We should do everything we can to take full advantage of that. It's the return on investment is not as great as what you would get out of a frequent commuter who's going to use your system once and then just become a devotee and use it for the rest of the time they're commuting to their job. But it's worth us trying to maximize the amount of that leisure travel commuter as much as we can. And we need to brainstorm about what else we can do, what customer service enhancements, customer experience enhancements, promotional opportunities. These are all things that we should be experimenting with right now, especially if we're starting to realize what the new normal might be.
One of the things I hear all the time, which limits our ridership, is the last mile issue. It's great if you're coming to San Francisco and you want to go someplace a block away or a couple blocks away. But if you're coming in and you're going anywhere else, then you got to figure out how to get there. And I think that's why people are in their cars, because they can get to the museum or whatever it is they're going to much easier, they think, than currently when they end up at a ferry building. How do they get to these other places? So it's that's what I keep hearing. What can you do about that? I don't know.
What about, go ahead, Jess.
I'm interested in learning more about the August numbers. We did have the subvariant of Omicron hit us pretty hard in July, and I wonder if that had some impact on our ridership. Looking at the 10-day weekday average ridership, it looks like a few of the routes are pretty, level and stable. But looking at Oakland, for instance, Oakland and Alameda, if you're looking between April and August, yeah, there's a bit of a drop here in early August, but that's a pretty upward trajectory there if you just remove June. So that's one of the things that I want to say. Looking at the fare box recovery for the entire year, we're at 24%, right? And that's good for a transit system that is diverse and provides a service that people can rely on. having a very, very high recovery or fare box recovery is a sign that it's a high fare and we have very reliable peak oriented commuters. What we're seeing here, if you go one slide forward, maybe one more. The one with the percentages, yeah, this one, for instance. If we can go to the one for July, is that, like you said, Gabe, with weekend, we're above the ridership that we were in 2019. Between 11 a.m. and even at 9 a.m. until 3 p.m., we're at pretty much 100% of our previous ridership. And so we are providing a different service now than we did before. And we can do more to encourage the midday ridership, increase our peak ridership too. But we have become a much more diverse and instead of thinking about the regional commuters, the regional service, we're now providing a service throughout the day, and the week, which I think is fantastic. I'm hopeful that August and September will continue to gradually go up and that it gives us a good projection for the future. And there are, of course, other things we can do as we're changing our brand and our operations here over the coming year towards even continued increases in ridership.
Is there a benefit to room in the budget for an advertising campaign at this point that's, you know, really kind of potent that we can get out there as we get into the fall? Kids are back in school. The traffic is worse now. It's not back to normal. You know, I tried to get in the other day and couldn't make the ferry because I got stuck at the Caldecott in traffic, which I hadn't seen in a while. You know, so there's, you know, the public is the traffic, the auto transit using public, I have a feeling, is feeling more of a pinch than they felt in 3 years. Now that school is back, the school was really not back, very consistently back now. And I was surprised to see that. That was a long trip. And I'm wondering, I couldn't even make it in the city that day because when I got to the bridge, it was 50 minutes and I had a meeting in a half hour. So I had to turn around and figure out something else, how to do it virtually. But, you know, there is an opportunity. You know, what I said when I saw that was, people are going to start thinking about BART again. They're going to start thinking about transit again. And we should help them. You know, this is BART's 50th anniversary celebration coming up on the 10th. And there'll be a lot of, you know, talk about BART, what's happened to BART, you know, the greatness of BART, the challenge of BART, which affects us. Because people think of transit in the Bay Area, they think of BART. And, you know, the more people who feel good about transit, the more people are going to use the ferry. But I think the ferry stands, you know, aside. And, you know, maybe it would be a good time if we had the resources to do it in a meaningful way. To kind of get out now and say, you know, it's September, welcome back. Let's go sailing. Is that possible?
Yeah, we absolutely. We have the marketing spigot on all the time, and then it gets turned up at opportunities, and we may be at one of those opportunities. I think that in addition to the changes in the schedule and the changes in the fare, the campaign that we had out there when we launched the pandemic recovery program was extremely effective. And if you remember, we had billboards because we thought that congestion might be an incentive for driving people back to the ferry. I think we attracted a lot of folks to the ferry. Congestion never really came back until, and I'm glad to hear that it's starting to come back. I think that's good news for us. But even though bridge traffic has been near 100%, it's been spread out throughout the day. And so those instances of congestion impacting travel time is a more recent phenomenon. And maybe now it's time for us to
Yeah.
take advantage of that target and, target that as a specific market that might be right for the ferry system. Tom, I know is thinking about this stuff all the time, so we will make sure that we put our thinking caps on. Consider that we definitely have funding in the budget to turn that spigot up higher when the.
Could we offer a free trip? Do a campaign around free ride, check us out, something to get people. My wife's a psychologist. And she says people get really into their comfort zone. They just get really used to doing what they do, and getting people to change their, the inertia factor is a really big deal. And, we weren't expecting to be in this pandemic situation this long. So people are really, really used to, in the beginning, we were all scared about working at home. What was this going to be? How would this feel? Right? So it was uncomfortable doing that. Necessity, doing it by necessity. After a while, everybody got good at doing it. Right? They got a new chair. They figured out how to make lunch, how to wear shorts and, look good on top and not so much on bottom, all that stuff. And now they've been doing it so long, this is what they do. And, her view of it is, people really need a push to get them out of the comfort zone somehow. That's not an easy thing to solve for, right? But, seems like we need something like that, because it's not really, it doesn't seem really normal for people to be working this way. I know it feels really normal now, and people actually like it. They'll say they prefer it, even though they say they don't like it, but they prefer it, right? Or they say they don't like it, but they don't want to change it. People don't like change. So, maybe get some, it's not, it's like what you said is correct. We got to focus on what we can do. So what I think we could do is do some advertising, poke around a little bit, try to move people out of that comfort zone a little bit, get them out, move them on. And once you take a trip that you otherwise weren't going to take, maybe that's what would trigger people going, wow, actually this was great. I'm going to do more of this. Get our ride, get new riders, get our old riders back. Get that, that curve, flatten out a little bit. And then, I think to Tony's point, is an age-old point we've been making for a long time, but we don't really address enough, is that first last mile. We talk about it, but we don't really solve for it in ways that are, I think, market driven. So, people don't want to switch modes. The ferry trip's a great trip, but if you have to combine it with 2 bus trips, it's no longer so great. And, I remember I used to live in Puerto Madera, and I would go to the bus stop, and I could either take the bus down, to Golden Gate to downtown San Francisco, where it stopped near my office, or I could take the bus to the ferry, where it stopped near my office. And so I would go, I'm going to take the ferry, and I'd get on the bus and go downtown, because I didn't really want to do the 2 trips, and get on, get off, get on. And that was a real easy, right? So, I know the world of transit feels very uncomfortable about Uber and Lyft and so forth, but a big problem that transit in general is having is the convenience and the orientation of that. People are choosing that way of getting around all the time, like huge numbers of people. And that's the best, that solution, bikes and scooters are great, but the best way to get to maybe deal with this problem would be to have one ticket that you got. And, somebody comes and picks you up, takes you to the ferry, somebody picks you up if that's what you need, takes you where you need to go. There's no guessing, and vice versa. So it's, pretty easy. So that would mean, some kind of partnership with, sitting down in earnest with those companies and figuring out if that's viable. Now, I'm probably public transit heresy to say it, but, I said it 5 years ago, 6 years ago, sitting in a similar seat. Nobody really wanted to go there. So every 5 or 6 years, I should mention it.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see more willingness to cooperate with TNC companies where it makes sense. Our pilot program in Vallejo, you get in Solano County, you get an 80% discount if you take a Uber or a Lyft ride to the ferry terminal.
Yeah.
And that gets quite a few users. So let us think about what I agree with you with marketing, advertising, it needs to be bold. It's going to be most effective. I think we saw that with our steps that we took on the pandemic recovery program. It's the most bold part of that action, part of that plan that produced the best results. So let us think about what would be right that's bold for this point in time, whether that's a first last mile creative partnership or some sort of a promotional free fare or something else that we might think of.
Thank you. Other comments? Any members of the public interested in commenting on this while we're on the subject? Fine. Okay.
I'm just gonna say that I think we have to take action. Everything I'm following in my role is the workers are not gonna come back in this area in a meaningful way. Banking is really pushing it hard, which is affecting more New York than it is San Francisco, given where banks are headquartered. So I do think we have to do what you all have been talking about and be creative once again, and so we can figure out how to capitalize on the new hybrid work and some of the team building that hybrid work is bringing forward when people do come into the office. I do think there's a role for exactly that mixture between recreational voting and commuting, and how somehow we can tap into that vis-a-vis some of the business community. So there's a lot of ideas out there. Whether they produce meaningful movements and the number of passengers, I'll take a lot more study than I've given it, but I do like where this conversation is going.
Okay, good suggestions, good discussion. Thank you. One last item on the executive director report. We have a survey that was completed for our Warriors passengers, and Tom's going to give us a summary.
Thanks for all that good feedback. That's really helpful as we continue. So we ran Warrior service for the second season of this past season. The first one was in the 2019-20 season that we don't like to talk about in the regions in terms of but really good ridership throughout the season on our weekday trips, where we typically use the Gemini class boat, which is 225 passengers. We were at or close to capacity most games. And then on weekends we use the bigger boat through and sell more tickets. Really positive, and that's kind of the main piece of data that we want to look at. The ridership is really good, and we know that the service is suiting. But we did survey passengers. We reached out to anyone who had bought a ticket throughout the season for Warrior service, and then anyone signed up for our Warrior specific email list. Full data is in the staff memo. I just want to highlight a couple of items. One is that people were highly satisfied overall. People thought it was a good experience. Convenience was the number one reason that they chose the ferry, interestingly enough. And then one of the items we see on our other surveys, which is comfort, and then it was a fun experience. And if you've ever been on one of the Warriors ferries, you're seeing photos from it, they're decked out in their gear, they're having a good time pre-gaming on the way to the game, because concessions are open for the pre-game. So they're able to get some slightly cheaper refreshments than once they get to the arena. We saw a lot of good feedback on the walk between Pier 48.5 and Chase Center. People were not dissatisfied with that, but a lot of people did note that it'll be great when there's a terminal right across the street. So that really reinforces the point that it's an important topic in our future system. The only significant sticking point was the pre-game arrival time, especially for weekdays, is a little tight, and it was really a little bit tighter early in the season when they were checking vaccination status at the door, which created a delay getting into the arena. We don't think we'll be able to make changes this year because that service is interlined with other services. We create a domino effect of schedule shifts that we're not prepared to try to address because we want to respect the schedule across the system. But it is something we're looking at going forward. And then on the weekend, we're currently toying with some options to adjust it on the weekends. So that folks taking the direct trip can get there a little bit earlier, enjoy the Bride City and take their time getting to the arena. Otherwise, more than a majority, 60% of passengers were happy. They thought it was just right, the time of the ride. Then, yeah, that's it for that item. I'm getting into any questions.
Thank you, Tom. Go ahead.
I can just say great results and great summary of the findings. It's fantastic to see the response that this service is getting. So thank you.
It's a shame you couldn't have had some impact on the Giants pitching. So we could have gone in the playoffs or something like that. This we could have used a bump.
That's a huge impact. The Giants record, you can tie it to ridership to Giants games on the ferry.
Sure.
For August and September, for sure. If you look back the prior season, it's a good indicator, especially for the day games where we see it feed over to our regular ridership, our regular service. There's definitely a tie there. So right now it's
There was one follow-up that I wanted to mention as well, and that WETA will connect with staff from the Warriors and SFMTA regarding opportunities and availability of a shuttle service for mobility limited passengers. I think, again, back to the first and last mile, this is another one of those initiatives that can be taken, explored. Sense. So thank you.
Great. Chair, nothing else to report.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. It's great, great report, really good, important discussion to have. We're at that time where, we probably need to double down on some of the things you started and, take it to the next level. So excited to work with you on that. Let's go to item number 6, which is the consent calendar, which includes 5 items. And since you all have the agenda, I won't read through them all, but if anyone on the board would like an item removed for separate discussion, please. Would it make sense to pull the item C and link that up with item 9? Because we're kind of approving the request for proposal, and then we're talking about the previous report.
Probably would be item D. If you want to link up.
Yeah, excuse me.
Yeah.
Why don't we pull that one and then are there any other items on the consent calendar? So can I get a motion on the consent calendar?
Moved.
Second.
Move and second. Any member of the public want to pull an item? Any evidence of that? Okay, we've got a motion and a second on the consent calendar. Can we have a roll call, please? Yes.
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 So with the pleasure of the board, why don't we move 6D up in front of item number 9? Take it then. Item number 7, approved contract award to Shaw, Yoder, Antwes, Schmelzer, and Lang for the provision of state legislative representation services.
Good afternoon.
What they need is another partner with a really long name.
I'm going to shorten it right now. Speak louder? Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you in this room. Item 7 request your approval to award a contract to Shaw Yoder. The other names on there, I'm just going to shorten it to Shaw Yoder. For WETA's state legislative support services in the amount of $222,000 for a 3-year term beginning October 1st, with the option to extend it for up to 7 years. Back in February, the board directed staff to advertise this contract in an effort to periodically competitively bid professional services contracts. We delayed the advertisement to line it up at the end of the state legislative session so that we weren't switching lobbyists or having a contract at any date that was outside of the state legislative session. So that proposal, the request for proposals was released on June 24th. posted on our website, sent out to our mailing list, and sent to 94 different lobbying and public relation firms registered on our new procurement system Bonfire. Proposals were due the 28th of July, and 3 firms submitted proposals, including our current lobbyists, Knoxville LLP, Shaw Yoder, as well as a firm named Corey Consulting, and all of them responsive. We developed an evaluation committee that included staff from WETA as well as a representative from outside, and we reviewed the proposals based on the evaluation criteria listed in the RFP. We all independently reviewed them, and no interviews took place since there was a clear winning proposal based on the score. The board item lists the scoring table on page 2. And based on the review of the evaluation committee, we recommend a contract award to Shaw Yoder. Shaw Yoder has been at the center of transportation advocacy for decades. They have extensive experience and specialize in lobbying for transportation, public transit, local government, land use, housing, ports and goods movement, procurement, and infrastructure issues. They have a record of achievement in the enactment, defeat, or amendment for legislation for their clients, as well as assist their clients in securing funds for grants, as well as the state budget process. They also provide management support for the California Transit Association, and through that role, they regularly serve as policy experts to a variety of different forums, including the state legislature, governor's administration, Congress, and other agencies and departments. One of the selling points of their proposal was the depth of the team that they proposed, and with the increased amount of legislative work that we've been doing for the last year or 2 now, we want to make sure that we have a robust team. So they proposed to have Matt Robinson and Michael Pimentel, both as project managers for our contract, and they're going to divide responsibilities between themselves based on the subject matter expertise as well as their relationships with decision makers relevant to our issues or priorities. They also included 2 support lobbyists, as well as a legislative aid to help support our needs. And they have a wide range of specialized areas that these support lobbyists provide. So we are recommending an initial contract term of 3 years, and with an option to extend it for 4 additional years, for a total of 7 years. The services would be provided on a fixed fee or fixed annual fee of $72,000 in the first 2 years, increasing to $78,000. So for the 3-year term, the initial term is a total of $222,000. And then if we decide to extend the contract, the additional, the 4 option years, the combined total is $330,000. Sufficient funds are available in the FY23 operating budget to fund this contract, and then we would be putting money in future year operating budgets for the remaining initial contract. That concludes my report. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. The option years, is this their option or mutual option?
Our option.
Our option. But they don't have to do it very long, but yeah.
Yes, there's lots
Would
of
work out very well. The firm that's been doing it, Nossaman, they were one of 3 bidders. I was a little surprised to see we didn't have more bidders. Because you mentioned, I think in the report, that there are something like 2 million lobbying firms in Sacramento, and only 3 of them bid. What do you think was behind that?
I'm not sure. We posted on Bonfire, and there's 94 different lobbying and public relation firms. I'm not quite sure.
It's always a challenge at the state level. If this were a federal contract, we would see more bidders. There's a little bit of a unwritten gentleman's agreement in Sacramento that
Not to take it.
if a firm is going to compete for renewal of their existing contract, then other firms will not want to interfere with that.
And you said it was a consensus amongst the committee that reviewed this, that they were that they would be a good choice. I think it would be, first of all, if we're going to vote in favor of this, I don't know if we're going to vote in favor of it or not, but assuming we might, I would want to thank Nossaman for the work that they did, the last several years. We've had, a lot of contact with them over the time. So it's I think it's always a little hard with these firms, which is probably why they have that unwritten contract to lose the work. But I trust the staff's judgment on comments. So I'll open it up to comments from directors, questions.
I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there comments from other board members? The members of the public wish to speak on item 7?
No one has signed up.
Okay, let's take a vote on it then, please. Yes,
Vice Chair Boyer.
Yeah.
Director Alpha.
Yes,
Director.
Yes,
I think it would be a good idea. You know, yesterday was the last day of the legislative session. So we're now into the period where the governor is going to be signing, a lot of bills, and there'll be a lot of, there is and will be a lot of talk about that. But, in order to be, effective in this game, you need to kind of go into the legislative session with, with ideas and things we think we need to achieve in Sacramento. So I think it would be good to agendize that maybe for next month. Certainly no later than November, but I would think maybe next month, and have a conversation and have the staff do some thinking about areas where we think we need some help from the state. It's always funding, but then there's legislation, that we may think we might want to consider, right?
Yeah, every year we do a state and federal legislative program, and we will bring that forward with enough time to
Good.
make sure we get board input and thoughts on it.
It would be good to meet these two gentlemen as well, sort of get their take on things. So good. Okay, that takes care of item number 7. So thanks for that. So let's go to item number 8, which is the on the advertising policy. Let me get back to the agenda so I can properly read it. Huh? It's WETA advertising policy. I guess I got it right.
Chair Letterman, apologies, you're getting a lot of me today.
That's all right.
I'll try to get through this one, and I'm going to actually look to Steve Miller, our counsel, for help on this one if there are questions, because it's largely just a legal policy to protect us, and I don't have anything. So as you know, many transit agencies offer advertising opportunities at their stations, terminals, on board their vessels. You've been around the city lately, you've probably seen the windshield bus that is running around. They have a very nice wrap with crackers. We don't do any of that currently. We don't have any advertising opportunities on board our vessels. Before we start doing that, we definitely need a policy that would effectively and ensure that any advertising on board or at our station doesn't discourage ridership. Our service is very helpful. Even discourage ridership, certainly for the certain guardrails in place. We do think this is a potential source of revenue for WETA. As we all know, every source of revenue is valid. We should explore every source of revenue, so that's why we're bringing this through now. It's definitely prudent to have a robust policy in place to ensure that advertising doesn't discourage ridership, and also to ensure viewpoint neutral environment while protecting First Amendment rights of potential advertisers and passengers. The current plan is to run this advertising program in-house to really test the potential for it initially, to test the demand for it, run competitive rates so that we can get some businesses in, and to limit the advertising to the onboard video displays that are on all of our ferries, in addition to some potential poster or banner opportunities in our. That the draft policy is in your packet. If you have a chance to review it, I would be happy to defer.
well, has it been reviewed by our attorneys?
It was largely written by our.
Okay, very good. Then I'm satisfied. Okay.
So, I think that the notion that we would raise additional funds through advertising makes sense. The concern that you raised, that I think the language tries to address, makes sense to have, which is, the problem that BART has had, which is somebody takes out an ad and it's offensive in some way. And what's offensive to, what's not offensive to one person might be offensive to another person. and so forth. And so they've wrestled with that at times, as have other agencies. So I guess the question I'll ask Stephen is, how do we, what's really our ability in-house to, or outhouse, but in-house, if that's how we're going to do this, to sort of avoid those kinds of circumstances and become, the focus of negative attention because, we put an ad on there that somebody saw as being, out of sorts with what they thought it should be.
Right. Well, I think one big differentiator between WETA's situation and other transit agencies is that you're starting with a clean slate, starting with a policy before you have had a kind of an advertising program. Many agencies, including the ones you just mentioned, have found themselves in difficult situations where they've been accepting advertisements and then want to try and close a door that has been opened to creating what the courts refer to as a public forum on the outside of transit vehicles. But because you have never done advertising on your ferries, you're starting with that clean slate. And I think this policy should put one's mind as close to ease as is possible, that you're not creating a public forum, and that if you accept advertisements in accordance with this policy, you should pass the legal muster of courts. The First Amendment can be a highly litigious environment. Just last month, so just in preparation for this meeting, in the city of Richmond, Virginia, exactly the same situation. The public transit agency tried to reject an advertisement from an animal rights organization with photographs of monkeys behind bars for no animal experimentation. And they didn't have a policy like WETA's. And the court said you probably could have prohibited ads like this had you had a policy, but since you don't, you can't. And it's very hard to close the door once it's been open. So maybe that's a long-winded answer, but the answer to your question is because you're starting where you are, I think you're in pretty good shape. And your policy, which, as Tom mentioned, is viewpoint neutral. Viewpoint neutral is as opposed to content neutral, right? So you said no political ads. You haven't said no, that's viewpoint neutral. Whereas content, restricted would say no Democratic ads or no Republican ads. You're not saying that. You're being viewpoint neutral. And the combination of starting without having set up a public forum and being viewpoint neutral and limiting it to commercial speech, I think you're in pretty good shape.
Okay. I like that we're going to restrict from deceptive advertising.
Yeah, I mean,
Good luck with that.
there are always gray areas, and every word can be interpreted differently. So, it's impossible to promise results, but this is a good policy that should keep you out of trouble.
If a food calls itself all natural, is that deceptive?
You mean, your question
Since
is,
there's no
can we
definition,
reject?
there's no legal definition to that word.
Can
Is it
we
deceptive?
reject a
I mean, I
food
find it-
advertisement because it thinks it is deceptive? That's a great question. I think I'm not going to answer that question. There will be case by case situations. The policy has in place sort of an escalation ladder. If WETA wants to reject a proposal, there are a couple of steps to go through.
I would just say, I'm going to vote for it. I think I think we should go down the path to this because I think we need the money. And I think, the public has a right to information, and, I think it's generally a good match. I'd say people in the Bay, people, but especially people in the Bay Area are, they care a lot about things. They care about their environment, they care about society, social justice, I think for a good reason, and so I think, my suspicion is that we're going to hear more about this, when we get those ads running. Somebody sees something that's, will look really innocuous to people who are in charge of reviewing it, and they'll find out it wasn't innocuous to somebody in the public who feels somehow that there's something not right about it, and that WETA shouldn't be associated with that, and that we're going to then be dealing with that and figuring out what to do about it. So I just say, let's keep our eyes open as we go down the path of this, because, I think I suspect we'll go down that path.
We will.
What public agencies advertising policies have been most informative in developing this policy?
I don't know most, but we certainly evaluated it in light of all the Bay Area policies, BART, Golden Gate, Caltrain, including Southern California, LA Metro, as well as MetroLink, all of whom I just mentioned have very similar. There's been enough case law now that there's some magic words that everybody uses and all these policies use. And the issue from drafting a policy is to have a defense against rejecting a policy, not in responding to complaints that you've accepted a policy for the reasons that Director Wonderman may have just mentioned.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Absolutely.
Under the policy guidelines, what's a member of the public to do if they, what's my recourse as a member of the public who feels, something's not right about something I'm seeing? Is there a body I complain to? Is there an adjudication process for this? Is that in there?
So that's not really part of the advertising policy. The advertising policy has a process if you are a potential advertiser and WETA has rejected your advertisement. But if you're just a member of the public and that doesn't like what you've seen on the boat, on an advertisement, I think I'll defer to Tom that's a customer issue separate from the advertising policy itself that's drafted.
Right, so I think that's exactly right. Customers would reach out to us through our customer service channels. That would filter up, we would evaluate. I think if it were a case where we thought there was a legitimate complaint or a legitimate issue where something got missed.
But I'm an advertiser. I paid for this. I have a right to be there. The group said I did, accepted the check. He says, I don't like that. Says it to you. You say, okay, somebody complained or a couple of people complained, so we're going to pull it. As an advertiser, do I have a grievance, legal or grievance? Or, can it be set up in a way where it's clear to the advertiser that they sort of advertise at their own risk this way? So that if I would like WETA to be able to quickly dispense with a problem and be able to say to an advertiser, look, we accepted the ad in good faith, but also in good faith, we're going to pull it. And there's nothing you can do about it. We'll give you your money back. Could we do that?
This is now a question more, I would imagine, of contract than anything else. If you've accepted an advertisement, it would be you've entered into some kind of an agreement with the advertiser, and those agreements can have whatever terms the parties agree to.
So I think if maybe the board doesn't need to decide this, but as we're going forward, I would strongly urge you to put in language if it needs to be in the contract, then in the contract, but that enables us to make decisions that sort of are, biased toward being able to pull something rather than saying, well, we have to keep it. And then it becomes like a brouhaha. I'd rather have the advertiser be unhappy than have the public be unhappy. So that's my thing.
That makes a lot of sense. And we have not developed the contract yet because we, of course, wanted to put back on the policy itself. Steps. So we'll work with council to ensure that there's both that mechanism plus a way for us to determine, what's our process if there is 1, 2, 10 that we can work on internally, similar to how we do with every other issue.
The theory is if you've done the work in advance, you limit your exposure on the back end. So, to that point, I think that's a great point. Let's do that to the maximum level we can as we get into this. It's seen this before. Monique, did you have a comment?
I did. I wanted to ask about advertising locations and the ability for the executive director or the committee, I guess it's called, to decline advertising on locations that WETA does not want to advertise on. A little experience with this, and I would highly recommend we be very overt about it. So what I'm going to say is different. I'll say it a different way. You in your mind know where you want to put advertising, but there's nothing here that says those are the only places that you will accept advertising. I think you should say that. And you have the right to reject advertising on a place that you don't want to have it. Trust
So,
me on this.
Yes, no, that's a great observation.
You got
This
that.
policy it focuses on the content of the ads and WETA's ability to accept ads, not on the location. And you're absolutely right.
Yeah, but it focuses on the ability of WETA to reject
Right.
them as well.
And in the purpose, it does specifically say where it could be. Ferries, facilities, publications, website, and social media accounts.
It's vague. I think it's too vague.
It's- yeah, it's too
And the-
vague,
And the,
yeah.
and the committee / executive director's ability to decline an ad, don't, doesn't specifically say because it's outside of the staff determined locations for advertising. You'd be shocked
There's
what-
no reason why the board, either the board and or the executive director could not do that. So
Yeah, that's the way I envision it is that we would define in advance of going to the market and seeking potential advertisers, we would define where we want those ads to be. And then ask the advertiser where they would like to place their ad. And if it's somewhere that's outside of a place that we define, we would say, we're sorry, we will not put an ad there.
Yeah, I think that's implicit here. What I'm recommending is that you make it explicit that you have the right to reject it. If someone is pressuring you to put advertising, that's not one of your determined locations, because you will get that.
Yeah, I was even thinking about the gates, that there are big blank walls, but they're windows too. And so at that point, when we are ready to put ads potentially on those big windows, we want to make sure that we're not limiting use and maybe we say no. And that's something that needs to be set down the line, because in BART, for instance, there are tons of blank walls that are fantastic for large ads or advertising, but we want to have the views from our gates as well. So thinking about that when we specify locations at that time. It's a good comment. Thank you. Director Moyer.
It's up to you, but that's my.
Okay,
Do we want to move with an amendment, clarification that there should be some with the opportunity to, or include one sentence on rejecting, or do we want to leave it as is?
if we reflect those items in the minutes, does that cover it, or do we need to make amendment to?
if you want to include in the policy
Mhm.
reflection of this discussion of the location, you should put that in the policy and not just have it be in the.
I think, in purpose, under purpose, the first sentence specifies spaces throughout WETA's ferries, facilities, publications, website, and social media accounts. I would add a sentence there. I don't know the specific, I can't. Monique, would you have the language, the sentence? WETA has the authority, or what do we say?
Yeah, I think in the third paragraph, where we're at the bottom of the third paragraph under purpose,
Okay.
where it says all advertising shall be subject to this uniform viewpoint neutral policy. Should also be subject to WETA approved locations. However you're going to maintain your list. I don't know if you're going to publish your list from time to time or how you're going to maintain that location list, but I don't think easily enough. I just think to be clear to all parties.
And WETA specified locations.
Yes, yes. It says earlier in the paragraphs that you'll have They'll have the locations.
Yeah, that works. So move with the amendment,
So thank you. And
or do we need public comment? Sorry. Or do we?
I wanted to make ask
Okay.
another question, so. Thank you for the amendment. We now have a motion in a second. on that version, right? So, if California was personified, we know that we hate tobacco and we like cannabis. Tobacco bad, cannabis good. So why are we rejecting cannabis ads? I think we'll get some flack for that from the cannabis folks who, really like cannabis and believe that it solves most of our problems.
So we talked about this issue a lot and alongside alcohol, because a lot of the transit agencies. Where we came down in framing the policy, which of course, to your discussion, is that items that are prohibited from being on board the ferry, that's a no-go for advertising. Items that are allowed on the ferry, including alcohol that's produced on board, would be allowed. And we felt it would potentially be a little hypocritical to sell alcohol and prohibit those same alcohol companies from advertising that they have alcohol available on our advertising, whereas we don't sell the cannabis products currently or tobacco. So that was one of the things there. Some of the other items that are prohibited advertising are also not allowed. Steve, if you have any comment.
No, that's right. I mean, these are areas where you board has discretion to do a thumbs up or down. There's not a legal reason why you may or must allow or restrict cannabis advertising.
I mean, just because we don't sell it doesn't mean we don't, we have a particular problem. I mean, the people of California voted specifically to make cannabis legal, whether I like it or not, or agree with it, is beside the point. So it seems a little bit out of sorts that, the state would vote in favor of cannabis and we would vote against it. I don't, what do others think about it?
No, it's not. I wouldn't, I mean, firearms and tobacco are legal too. But we don't necessarily have them on our advertising on our boats in the future. I think it's fine. There are plenty of opportunities to have cannabis ads, but it doesn't have to be on WETA's ferries. And I think that's perfectly fine.
Just one legal gloss to this too, is that there are, under the commercial advertisements, there are some products where there may be a gray area leading over into the political, social issues that WETA's policy does not allow. And maybe tobacco, cannabis, firearms occupy that kind of a gray area. Maybe.
Tony, you look like you're thinking something. You want to say something?
I've just been thinking of Don Corleone wine. And how would we deal when the Sons of Italy comes forward? But no, let's just go ahead with it and try. There's nothing we're not gonna solve all these issues today. And there will be complaints and there will be issues we'll have to deal with, but we need the income. So let's do it.
All right, with that push for motion, we have a motion and a second on an amended item. So are there members of the public who have indicated a wish to comment on this item? Are there members of the public who haven't expressed such a wish who would wish to comment on item, I think we were on item number 8. Anybody wish to comment? Okay, if not, we'll close comment on the item and we'll take a roll call vote.
Chair Wonderman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Boyer,
Yes.
Director Alba,
Yes.
Director.
Yes.
So we have before us the item 6C, excuse me, 6D, authorized release of a request for proposal for community outreach services, followed by community outreach program report. So would it make sense to do 9 first and then 6D?
I like
So let's
that.
go to 9 and we'll get the report. And go forward.
Great, thank you, Chairman. I'm really pleased to be able to give you a report, just an informational item on our fiscal year 22 community outreach program. You may remember that when we brought the fiscal year 22 budget to you, it highlighted there that we were going to spend $100,000 on community outreach, which is not something that we had done in the past. Been very marketing focused and not a whole lot of community relations and outreach. A lot of that is bandwidth and resources because it's pretty, labor intensive work, and it's really important work that we need to prioritize. So we've done that over the past year, and we're happy to. So really the purpose of our community outreach program is to engage in two-way conversation with residents and stakeholders for three big reasons. One is to ensure that there's continued local support for ferry service and communities that we serve. Another is to hear about local needs for water transit. We often hear from passengers. We don't often hear from non-passengers, and this is an opportunity to what they need from us. And third is to support agency and community goals by building relationships. There's a lot of mutual benefits when we connect with local stakeholders, whether they be elected officials or community leaders, really meet both our needs and their needs at the same time. Particular attention is being paid to bringing underrepresented communities into the conversation, which is important across all of our work. Three real engagement opportunities in marketing. We would call these audiences, but we don't talk like that with community outreach because this is really more engaging outreach. It's not people we're talking to, people we're talking with. Non-rider residents as I manage, we really want to engage with them on what their transit needs are, what the gap and barriers to ferry ridership is. We want to make sure that we're providing really relevant material in terms of their awareness of our service and our fare changes. This is especially crucial in the past year as we had really massive changes to our service plan and our fare structure. We wanted to make sure that that information is getting out to the community. In addition to awareness and discount programs. First start, which I know the board and our staff pointed out here in the Bay Area. That needs a lot of filtering out to the people because there's only so much that MTC and the big transit agents can do to get that word out to everyone who can benefit from it, especially if those folks are not currently right. Another engagement opportunities with community organizations. I mentioned there are a lot of mutual objectives that we can meet, talk with them, learn about their needs, and express our ability to potentially help them with this. We can partner to reach bigger audiences. They have a lot of access to constituents. They're right there in their neighborhoods and they're a trusted voice. And so if we can connect with them and make meaningful relationships, then we can potentially reach those audiences as well and hear back from those folks. We can support relevant local initiatives. It's great for us to know what's really going on in the light over Alameda beyond the surface level that we may get from just the general media or following the city council. We're really talking to people and organizations about what's going on and how we can fit in. And then, of course, to enhance support for ferry service, really important to have grassroots support for ferry service because we on the stage where we're not trying to stay flat all the time. We're trying to grow. So building that awareness and grassroots support for ferry service. Finally, business and labor groups, which is something that we've worked on over the years and we know we need to do a better job on to be able to support workforce travel needs and build WETA awareness among the powerful stakeholders. Industry groups, industry associations with major employers. And so that's a part of this as well. In terms of the tools that we're using for community outreach, ambassadors. So we contracted the two firms, BrandGov Outreach and Next Steps Marketing, to provide some outreach teams, some experienced, local, knowledgeable, and multilingual personnel that can go to these events, that can reach out to residents who are trusted in the community. So that's obviously a hugely important tool for any community outreach program. Collateral and promotional materials. We're really good at printing schedules and rider guides for our existing passengers and new passengers. But we needed to develop some different marketing material in multiple languages to be able to give to people who are not familiar with the ferry system, really convince them that this was an option for them to get around the ferry. Surveys, as you know, we're very big on surveys, having already talked about earlier this meeting. We developed, along with our partners, a really short 5-question survey intended for non-riders to find out how they get around when they need to get to San Francisco, to the East Bay, what are the barriers in terms of ferry service, what do they know about the ferry service and its discount programs. We did this, some digital and a lot of paper surveys to take to these outreach events. Then ticket vouchers, that's a really nice incentive that we have, is to be able to give people who've never ridden the ferry an opportunity to try it in exchange for a few minutes of their time. And a little bit of information. We'll go into a few of the strategies that we used this year. As I mentioned, brand gov outreach and next steps marketing for our contractors for this. They represented WETA at 50 community events over the course of the year. This ranged from large events like the recent Oakland Chinatown Festival and to emergency food pantries and farmers markets, the heart of the city market here in the city. Just a wide variety of things. Part of it was we wanted to test to see what would work, what would get really good engagement, where was there a huge need for information about ferry service. And we tested out a lot of different types of 5,000 pieces of collateral were shared, 1,000 of those were in Spanish. Going forward, we're really focusing in on the things that we've seen work. That's big, major cultural community events where you're bringing in people from a slightly wider regional area that are really focused on the topic and are there to have fun and the people love the ferry. So being able to talk to them about it, show them photos, and tell them how to ride is a good opportunity there. In addition to targeted neighborhood level events where we can get people who are very local, especially close to ferry terminals, and meet them where they are and communicate with them about both their ferry needs and about people. Also did neighborhood outreach. This is something that both of our firms did. You see a door hanger here. This is something that Next Steps Marketing did in the Richmond area. We're currently doing it as well. Just going to neighborhoods that are near the ferry terminal, letting them know that the ferry is there and giving them a QR code on the back, the URL, if they need schedule information, it's highlighting lower fares and more service. We also did some targeted outreach at multifamily housing. This one, we think there's a lot of potential here. We've been working on this when the initial Omicron wave hit, so we had to pull back from it. We think there's a lot of potential there, especially in Vallejo. There's a lot of multifamily housing pretty close to the ferry terminal or within a short bus ride. Leveraging neighborhood councils in Oakland for outreach, as we're going to continue to do now. And then Sunday morning outreach at a place of worship in South Vallejo, was with AME Church, welcomed us to talk to the parishioners about ferry service. There was a Soul Train and bus line that stopped right there in the neighborhood and ferry right to the ferry terminal. And we were able to talk to them about all sorts of ferry related stuff. Digital outreach, I won't spend much time on this one. This is one that really bleeds over with our pretty robust digital marketing efforts. So we are trying to find the right lines to navigate there to make sure we're not stepping on our own messaging or confusing our audience. But we partnered successfully with some government agencies, community organizations, and employers to solicit that survey feedback. We built really good lists of relevant leaders and community-based organizations that across the agency we can go back to over time to get feedback on our projects and planning. And then the survey data was really helpful, both from the paper survey and the digital survey, to provide good feedback to MTC regarding Clipper Start. That was a big one where we wanted to know what our folks in our service area knew about Clipper Start and why they maybe weren't participating in it. And one of the really actionable pieces of information we got was that the income limit for Clipper Start is really low. It's 200% of the federal poverty level. So we had a lot of interactions with folks who said, I'm low income in the Bay Area. I make more than 200% of the federal poverty level. I'm not young enough to qualify for a discount. I'm not old enough to qualify for a senior discount. So I'm paying full freight. So we've taken that feedback back to MCC and told them this is what we're hearing from our community. A lot of the information we got will continue to inform our policy making and our thinking around different issues moving forward. Community collaboration. This is a photo from a really amazing event that we held on a ferry from Vallejo, the 11 a.m. ferry from Vallejo. We hosted we hosted about a dozen leaders from local community groups to work on social issues, anything from houselessness to community security to income inequality and workforce development. We really just wanted to have a conversation with them about ways that WETA could support their work, ways that they could support our aim to get the word out about our fair programs and our service plan, and really making kind of amazing connections with these folks. And that's something that we'll continue to build over time as we continue this community outreach work to find ways that we can connect and find those mutual benefits. Then sort of the big one, we talked about this in an ED report last month, so I won't belabor it too much. I do want to share some photos because they're really fun and great. But we decided kind of mid-year to hold a very themed event. So we've done a lot of the farmers markets. We've leaned into other cultural events and neighborhood events. And we decided, what if we just have a ferry focused event? And what better place than Richmond? So we held the Richmond Ferry Fest in early June. It was a wonderful time. We always strike gold with the weather events. Must be the the purpose of this was to really, it was really twofold. One was to have a celebration in Richmond. This was as we were starting to get a bit more social coming out of the pandemic collectively in June. And so it seemed like a great opportunity for a party at Ferry Terminal. We also really wanted to raise awareness of the amazing service increases that Richmond has seen in the pandemic recovery program. For weekday service levels nearly doubled in Richmond. And for the first time ever, we brought back, or we established year-round weekend ferry service from Richmond. So we really want to highlight that, make sure people saw it, that it didn't get lost in the shuffle with all the other marketing we did with the pandemic recovery program. We partnered with Richmond Promise, which is a nonprofit in Richmond, to have our events on the same day. They were having their inaugural fun run at the ferry terminal around the Greatway Pavilion. What better way to have a great day than run 5K in the morning and then get on the boat. So we joined up, which really cut costs and streamlined a lot of the planning. Next Steps Media, we have some representatives from Next Steps, ESLB, and all of the Pittenger are on the call to chime in. They planned the event and worked with our comms and marketing firm communications to do a lot of the branding, building out the marketing of the event. And then we really treated this like a template for future events. So we're excited to see how it could evolve over time. Some of the photos of some of the great things that we had there. Bike East Bay hosted a child safety bike rodeo in the parking lot there. As you know, the parking lot at the Richmond Terminal has a pretty good size. So we blocked off for it and they brought out a trailer with bikes so kids could learn bike safety. We had live music, live performers, of course, community partners table. That's our table where we're giving out information, or I'm sorry, we're giving out information and pens you'll see there in exchange for email addresses and social media follows, which was a key deliverable for this event. Giant Jenga, giant Turner Connect floor, live painting, just a lot of fun stuff. And of course, Supervisor John Joy came out to give some really great remarks on the importance of ferry service and transit in Richmond. We had more than 2,000 people in attendance at the event, which was branded as San Francisco Bay Ferries Richmond Ferry Fest. So this was 2,000 people that came specifically for a ferry related thing. Our great draw is free ferry rides. So if we can park a ferry there and mix it in with our regular ferry service to San Francisco. It was a Giants day game, so it was a busy day at the terminal. But we had 1,500 people take free ferry rides that day just around the harbor, to the point where our last one maxed out. We had to turn people away. So we told them where they could buy a ticket for the next ferry to San Francisco if they really needed to get on that boat. As I mentioned, a dozen community partners, Kids Zone, Bike Rodeo, KCBS Radio caught wind of it and decided to set up shop there for the day. And they did all of their live traffic reports all day from right there and brought more people to us. And then we've collectively been calling our plan to replicate this across the system, Boatchella. So mixing in live music along with free ferry rides seems like a promising potential use of our resources and energy going forward. I should mention Mayor Tom Butt was scheduled to attend and give remarks, but he felt just. so he was unable to, but we had a great turnout. I want to thank Raphael again for his amazing support in making this happen, in addition to our partners at Next Steps Marketing and McKinsey Communications for getting it going. With that, and this will tie in with item 6D that we moved to. The work with Next Steps Marketing is ongoing through the end of October under the Executive Director's Contract Authority. We were able to keep them on for another few months using the existing budget funds. In August, they've been really active. I'll hear from Next Steps, gave you an update yesterday. They did 7 outreach activities with 1,200 pieces of collateral handed out in August. Really high point was the Oakland Chinatown Festival recently. Chinatown and Oakland is really close to Oakland Ferry Terminal. Chinatown, San Francisco is really close to the ferry terminal. So making those connections and increasing awareness of ferry service in the Chinese speaking community. I mentioned, or we're going to take up the RFP authorization. This would allow us to do a multi-year contract with a selected firm, assuming we'll get some qualified proposers. It would allow us to continue this work into the future. So that information is within that staff report. And then we're really hoping that this is just the start of the community outreach program for WETA, and that this blossoms and grows to be as big as our marketing program, honestly, going forward, because it really is important work that needs to continue. With that, I'm happy to answer questions on this item or.
First, thank you. It's a great, really great report. Very, very encouraging. And I think that a public agency can take that kind of thing on and have the forethought to reach out into the community in a different way like that with people who live nearby or may not even have that much contact, but is really says a lot about the people of the organization. Just it's a good feeling to know, and glad that we did it. Good photographs, and it seemed like it something we should certainly continue to pursue. I know it might be hard to measure exactly. I think it seems to me like we measure the performance of this based on things we do, as opposed to sort of what comes later. But maybe for something like this is okay. You start somewhere, go from there. To select these 2 firms, was that done by a competitive process, or these were folks we knew and we just said, let's get going?
There is a competitive RFP. The contract maximum was under the Executive Director Authority. So we did this in FY21, towards the end of FY21. We had a more competitive process. I believe we had 6 proposers. Our evaluation selected 2 and parceled them out geographically. Brandco had really strong experience in so that's where they focused their efforts over this 2022. Whereas Next Steps Marketing handled the rest of the East Bay, and we really directed them to focus on Richmond.
So I guess we'll get to the item going forward, but the idea is that you want to bring it to the board because we want to do more.
Right. So we're going to exceed the contract authority that Seamus can improve himself, even with a competitive RFP internally. So we board authorization to expand that out and to do a multi-year deal, a multi-year contract, because we think that this is similar to the marketing RFP that was on the consent agenda. It really behooves us, we think, to have a continued relationship with the firm, because the onboarding process to get that familiar with our mission and our brand standards and our kind of, so it can be a long process. So it's better to have them connected long term, and that way they also have our interests at heart.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Comments from board members.
Thank you.
It was awesome.
Yeah, fantastic. Coachella. I absolutely love the work we're doing, when the agency is doing on this type of outreach and reaching parts of the community that otherwise wouldn't have a connection. So this is fantastic. The feedback, I'm wondering if we could get a brief update on the Clipper Start program in a future meeting, in an upcoming meeting, because like you said, Tom, So it's a 3-year pilot. It's supposed to be done by the end or July next year, which means we have less than a year. But I wonder how much of the funding that was secured has been spent, and what if there's an opportunity for MTC or for the agencies to ask the MTC to continue or repurpose remaining funds or get extra funds to shape it up or increase the income limit from the 200% to something different, because it's not going to be a useful pilot, a 3-year pilot, if we're not getting participants because it's too limiting, too constrained. I would love to see that program be made permanent. And I know it's just a small component of this presentation, but I do think it's something that we as an agency, and I know that other agencies have the same thoughts. I'm wondering if we as the agency, again, together with other agencies, can make a push for. So yeah.
We can add that, an update on this Clipper Start program to a future agenda. We'll make sure we have some understanding of what other agencies are thinking about this and when the opportunities might be advocated for regional level.
Okay, and also the trend line, whether we've been able to grow Clipper Start usage or not, and that's another factor to bring to MTC if it hasn't.
Very good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So on to.
Yeah, let's just get any public comment on this item.
No one has signed up.
Anyone wish to comment? The firms that were performing the work, were they interested in saying something?
It's hard to get them on my screen here. I don't know if they can see them, but Peter, if you wanted to share anything, feel free.
They don't have to, just say, I think we want to say thank you.
It's like they're present.
Yeah,
There we go.
there she's.
I don't think we have a power, do we?
They are. It's like they're connecting body and they're having.
Give them a second.
They've been so patient on me.
Right.
Almost.
Sounds like Alexa.
We've allowed them to unmute, right? Melanie, that's not the issue.
It's like they're.
I'm not sure they'll be able to.
You folks on?
Like they can't even hear us.
Why don't we go on to 6D? And we'll call out and see if there's any conversation around that, and then they can speak on that. Or interferes. So on 6D, that was authorized release of a request for proposal for community outreach services. So I think we read the item and sort of know what's going on about it now. Is there any motion want to present? So Tony moves the item.
Mhm.
Jessica, is that you leaning forward to second? So we have a motion and a second on 6D. Any comment or from the board on 6D? I would just say this is, I think the item you just ran through on 9 shows that we, think this is, there's a lot of upward potential for this, and it's worth our attention. So we thank for that. Any member of the public on 6D who's now available to hear or speak?
Oh, we lost it.
I guess we lost it. All right, let's close it out and vote on it. We'll talk to them later. We'll talk to them at the next, at the next fest.
Chair Winderman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moyer,
Yes.
Director Alba,
Yes.
Director.
Yes.
That takes us to item 10, which is the last item, public comments for non-agenda items. Is there anyone signed up to speak to the board on a non-agendized item? Would anyone here or on in virtuosity land like to talk to us? Words of encouragement, wisdom, denial, anything good? Okay, hearing not, we'll close item 10. So, thank all of you. This is, it feels like we're, at that time where we've got some, big, some pretty good challenges, but I think some great opportunities ahead of us. And look forward to working with everybody to go forward with this, and hope everybody has a great fall, and we'll look forward to working with you. So with that, Michelle, adjourn the meeting.
Very good.
Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Wow.